When it comes to Pokemon who can talk to a human, there's no shortage, and we've been discussing the topic for years. But that isn't the only way to get a message across. So who are the humans that can natively understand Pokemon? First to mind might be N from Pokemon Black and White, because that was like his whole deal. Aside from being the puppet king of Team Plasma, being an orphan who grew up around Pokemon, it was likely here that he gained and further developed this ability, and we see him utilize it throughout the game. He refers to this as being able to hear a Pokemon's inner voice, which does make sense because Pokemon, much like animals in real life, don't necessarily have an exact spoken language. In the anime they sort of do, but at least in the video games we see much less of that. Of course there are countless theories about N secretly being a Zoroark, but I think for the most part what we see of him is pretty human, just he's a little awkward. Over in the anime, Anthea and Concordia are also stated to be able to hear a Pokemon's inner voice, but that's never mentioned anywhere in the video games. They're just stated to have also been orphans like N, so I guess I could see that being the case if they truly did have similar origins, but for now it's a bit inconclusive.
It's not important to me whether or not I actually hear a Pokemon's inner voice. The important thing is that a Pokemon and its trainer come together as one.
Immediately after thinking about Natural Harmonia Gropius, you might think that Psychic-type trainers can totally understand their Pokemon through telepathy. Hypothetically, yes, but we don't really have any confirmed cases. In the world of Pokemon, characters basically spell things out exactly, so I'm having trouble finding a specific example among them. The truth is that we don't even need to leave the Unova region because Iris can actually understand Pokemon as well. She's described as the girl who understands the hearts of dragons. Truly, we see this the most in Pokemon Masters, which is soft canon and builds on ideas introduced in the main series video games. Here we see how she's able to understand her own Pokemon. Whether it be Pokemon she's had the longest, Pokemon that she recently came to understand better, or more newly introduced Pokemon that everybody else is having trouble understanding. Though she doesn't really see this as any sort of special ability, and she assumed that all trainers could basically do the same thing. Another character who's pretty active and involved in nature, that fits pretty well. In the anime where we saw her the most, this was a pretty different interpretation, almost being something like a prequel to where we find her in the video games. Her animated version has an arc of coming to understand these Pokemon before she, fully develops that kind of ability.
You're a lot stronger, and that's because you evolved. You're going to be just fine.
But I'll still go ahead and count Iris as someone who can understand Pokemon. Really, when it comes to the main series video games, those are all we can identify. But in the anime, a few existing characters have had some added details, and exclusive characters also have this trait. First, I want to bring up Ash Ketchum, who sort of has about the same understanding as everybody else, but there's no denying that he at least has a special bond with Pikachu. Even though the I Choose You movie is a different continuity, that moment where we hear Pikachu speak human speech I feel is meant to show the audience what Ash is able to hear from that point onward. Also, Ash will later be revealed to have aura-based abilities which allow him to connect in special ways to Pokemon like Greninja with the Bond phenomenon, and Riolu later on, which is hard to ignore, so I confidently add him to the list.
Let me know! Lucario found its Megastone!
While we're still thinking about the recent movies, Coco is a great example, because after being raised by Zarude, he's able to understand and communicate with all Pokemon of the jungle, notably the group of Zarude around which he spent the most time. For all intents and purposes, this kid is a Pokemon. Like they made him into a Pokemon card, he used a Pokemon move in the movie, he gets to live the best of both worlds. By extension, Tommy the Kangaskhan kid introduced in the main series basically has the same deal, but I didn't see him get his own Pokemon card.
Dada, it's you!
I told you to stay away!
But
Next up we have Valerie, the Fairy-type gym leader from Pokemon X and Y. In the video game, her outfit is stated to be inspired by Pokemon, and she herself has said that she wants to become a Pokemon, so giving her the ability to understand them in the anime made a little more sense. It wasn't really given an exact name or cause, it was just sort of a matter-of-fact thing. But like I said, she was a perfect candidate for this. She also acts really weird and mysterious sometimes, so maybe there's something she hasn't told us. But I don't know, I can't be suspicious of those cute giant eyes.
Sylvie, Beyond Sil.
Also given the anime exclusive ability was Annabelle, who could empathize with Pokemon to understand their feelings and even command them in battle without speaking. As this was before Generation 4 introduced Aura, and Generation 5 the concept of inner voices, her understanding of Pokemon is implied to be more psychic with how most of her Pokemon are just, psychic type. I might imagine that now these might all be retconned into one thing. Otherwise, it is curious that she of all people was sucked up into an ultra wormhole and became a follower in Sun and Moon, though we didn't really get any confirmation of that skill over here. But during her Sync Pair story in Pokemon Masters, she says something along the lines of being able to connect with her Pokemon. So maybe I'll take this and cope, but that's really where it ends.
Focus Punch once more!
She didn't say anything.
Okay, after forfeit. Side beam.
As always, I should say that I haven't read much of a manga, all things considered, but I have at least read up to the point that introduces the character Yellow, who also has the ability to understand Pokemon. Again, this one is stated to be more psychic, but I imagine that it's basically all the same. I know Pokemon Adventures goes hard the further the story develops, so if by chance there are more characters over there who can understand Pokemon, let me know. In all honesty, I went into this thinking it would be pretty easy to compile a list, but it's actually really difficult, because something like talking Pokemon are much more popular and have been accurately cataloged, but not so much the other way around. There should really be like a fan wiki or something that compiles Pokemon information based on lore, characters, and story without all the mechanics of the video games. Maybe it would be easier to group characters together under categories like this. When it comes to the actual how of all this works, well, I think we can bring it back to that good old Canalab City Library lore that states humans and Pokemon used to be a lot closer. I mean, in some of the lore that got finalized, and even the stories that ended up on the cutting room floor that I recently talked about, the Pokemon there can just straight up speak with humans. But over the centuries, that communication was lost as people and Pokemon diverged onto two separate paths. So maybe in modern times, the people who are able to somewhat understand Pokemon through aura, their feelings, inner voice, whatever you want to call it, are the people who spend more time around Pokemon, living closely to them again and adopting some of their traits, once again blurring the lines between the two of them. I don't know, food for thought. So let me know what you think in the comments below about the topic, and please do let me know if there are any more characters who are able to understand Pokemon in basically any of the canons. As I mentioned, a franchise spanning over 20 years is bound to have a lot of lore, but for very specific ideas like this, they aren't documented and categorized the best. Gaps in my personal memory don't help, and honestly, I'm still making my way through every little piece of media that Pokemon has to offer, so that makes it all one big journey that I'm still taking. I totally expect to revisit this idea sometime in the future. But for now, all we can really do is grow the bond between ourselves and Pokemon. Thank you to every channel member for your continued support, including the Great Gators, Timeless Moron, Fancy Orange, Siakira MA, Sora Baker, Dejorant, Matthew Kelly, Mobile Empire, Ezra, Forfy Ion, Mugshot Cat, Pastel Blood, Accidental Creation, Jamie Jensen, SB Jump, Castform 7, Victor Bryan, DeAndre, Beowulf Arctidus, Adrift Shredder, Justin Dow, Zal Rome, Alex Switch Shiny Hunts, Tyler Hopper, Lockadox, Koi 13, Cemetery Hill, Cosmo 0, Rainfrux, Cheez-It 62, GatorKid 509, TF, Mathaclog 947, Taijirai, Justin R, Phantom, and Quago. If you would like to support, see your name here, get access to emotes for comments, live streams, sometimes early videos, and the members only podcast every month, you can become a channel member today. You can also follow me on Twitter and Blue Sky as well for more memes. Anyway, this is GatorX, and I'll catch you all later.
Adventure over the Unova region and discover more than 150 all-new Pokémon. Pokémon Black version and Pokémon White version out now, only on Nintendo DS. Catch the mythical Victini only from 4th of March to 22nd of April via the Nintendo Wi-Fi connection.